combination of lost jobs and millions of foreclosures means a lot of folks are homeless and hungry for the first time in their lives. One of the consequences of the recession that you don't hear much about is the record number of children descending into poverty. The government considers a family of four to be impoverished if they take in less than $22,000 a year. Based on that standard and government projections of unemployment, it is estimated the poverty rate for kids in this country will soon hit 25%. Those children would be the largest American generation to be raised in hard times since the Great Depression.
She won't have enough, so at night we'll just eat cereal or something. Other times my parents will fight about money because they don't have enough money to pay the food. We have to sometimes take food from a church.
In Seminole County near Orlando, Florida, so many kids have lost their homes, school buses now stop at dozens of cheap motels where families crowd into rooms living week to week. Becky Avalos runs the Seminole County programs for homeless kids.
Our numbers go up every day, between 5 and 15 new homeless students a day.
Every day?
Every day.
And she told us something else is new.
When I first started this program, 8 years ago, homelessness lasted maybe 2-3 months. But now with it lasting 3-6 months, a year, or 2 years, this is when children are developing who they are, and their foundation is broken.
How are these kids doing in school?
They're struggling. It's much harder. They're more at risk of not doing well. They're focusing on, how can I help mom and dad? We have so many students that want to quit school and go to work.
As you can see in the video clip, poverty is a very real and current thing in America. Poverty is the extent in which people do without resources. The resources are an individual's financial, emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical situations, as well as their knowledge and hidden rules and their relational resources. While there are governmental programs in place such as Head Start and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act to combat the negative effects that poverty has on children and children's education, there are still many issues that are seen in the classroom regarding students experiencing any form of poverty. Now over to Chloe to hear about Sheila Carter's first-hand experience in education while growing up in a family experiencing generational poverty.
Thanks, Allie. I'm here with Sheila Carter, and she's going to tell us about her experience with poverty and what that looks like in the education system and in the classroom. So Sheila, kind of describe to us what your experience was with poverty and what that looked like in your classroom.
Okay, well, I grew up in a large family, and my father worked. My mother stayed at home. So we weren't in deep poverty as far as not having enough to eat. We had plenty of food, but I think we were just on the fringes of poverty, definitely. And it really never affected me until middle school. I noticed that I began to feel self-conscious in middle school, and I noticed that a lot of the other kids that did not have a lot of nice clothes and things, it affected them as well. Mm-hmm. And they began to be kind of withdrawn also.
So middle school is when you kind of started feeling the effects of that?
Right.
Okay. What were some of the main things you struggled with? You talked about like image and like feeling outcasted. Is there anything else you struggled with?
I think it seems to me that myself and some of the other students, we tended to withdraw. I never felt like an outcast or anything. I simply felt that maybe I didn't have as much as
Okay.
some of the other students, and I withdrew myself some. And I think that as a teacher, I want to be aware that students have a tendency to do that, and I want to draw them out and make sure that I include them
Right.
before they really start to withdraw themselves.
Mm-hmm. So do you think kids today struggle with the same things you did as a child, or do you think it's gotten worse or better, or that kind of thing?
I know that poverty now is more prevalent,
Right.
I think, than it was then. So I think that there are many children that struggle.
So poverty's increasing?
I think so, yes,
Yeah.
according to statistics.
Yes. In your opinion, which ways do you think teachers, or how do you think teachers are affected by the students that are in poverty?
I think that many times the teachers just have no idea what to do. They are very busy and they don't realize that maybe a child is acting out a little bit or withdrawing some due to self-esteem issues due to poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that teachers are really unprepared for it.
So, learning how to become a teacher, how do you think teachers impacted your education, and how do you think as a teacher you can impact other kids?
Teachers impacted my education just simply by being a stable force in my life. I had many teachers that I greatly admire. When I become a teacher, I want to keep an eye out for those children that are feeling the effects of poverty and are withdrawing. And one idea that I have is giving them jobs to do, making them feel important in the class. Through my own research and being a mother,
Right.
I have learned that children, they love to feel needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a child, if all he can really do is pick up things and move them for you, you can make him feel good about himself just for doing that once or twice a week.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Sheila. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. I'm here with high school teacher Pedro Encarnacion, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his experience with students that live in poverty. Do you have any students in your classroom that are living in poverty, and if you do, how can you tell?
I do have students that live in poverty, and you can usually tell with these students because sometimes with the way they dress, they may wear the same thing throughout the week. Also, sometimes they show signs of them, being hungry or, just little things like that. Also, the way they communicate with one another, the way they communicate with me, sometimes it's very blunt, very brash. You can usually tell that some of those kids, have a tough home life.
Well, in the schoolwork or in school, where do you see that it affects the students the most?
Usually it's the kids, the students aren't prepared. They're not bringing, and that kind of goes back to your last question, kind of don't bring school materials, or they don't have the means, to do some of their work. So you can see it with them not being organized or they're not being prepared. So you have to kind of be flexible with them and be able to provide them a different way to either do the work or even provide them some materials to do the work.
Right. And what are some techniques that you use in your classroom to handle the issue of poverty? I know you said that you give them materials and stuff that they need, but what about maybe emotionally or spiritually or anything like that?
A lot of materials that I use, to be honest with you, is I try to motivate them. Once in 6 weeks in my classroom, I show a 2 to 5 minute long video, inspirational video, just to kind of inspire them a little bit. Sometimes when you live in poverty, either you can't see past that. You don't understand that they have the potential to be someone that that they probably don't have an example of at home, and that's pretty tough, and I myself can relate to that, so I try to put myself in their shoes, what would have helped me, what would have helped, other family members to be successful and not be quote unquote, another statistic.
Mm-hmm. Right. So overall, what do you think that we should do, or what should be done for students that do live in poverty? In my experience and what I've kind of, gathered over the years of coaching and teaching is that you kind of have to you kind of have to show them the love that they probably don't get at home. You have to communicate with them differently, and I'm not saying you treat every kid equal, but sometimes equal means you have to treat everyone fair to their means, to their circumstances. So always treat the kids fair, but sometimes you have to be able to be understanding of where kids may come from, because some of them may not have a meal the night before that morning. Some of them may struggle emotionally, sometimes in families that are in poverty. Their language towards one another is a little bit more brash, more forward than others, and you have to kind of understand their language and just go in it with an open heart. And before I teach, before I coach, I pray and I give thanks to God for putting me in the situation. And hopefully he can guide my words, and he can help me be able to communicate in a way that can change and impact their lives. Alright, well thank you very much, and Allie, back to you.
Thanks, Chloe and Katie. Now that we have heard from both a teacher who has taught students in poverty and a person who has experienced education while living in poverty, we can understand that there is more to it than what meets the eye. Students experiencing poverty will benefit most from teachers that are intentional in the way that they teach, interact with their students, and that give them the support that they need. Just as no two kids in middle-class families or upper-class families are alike, neither are children in poverty. Everyone responds to situations differently, and that is why it is so important for teachers to build deeper relationships so they can figure out how to best educate each student. When a teacher understands where a child in poverty is coming from, the teacher can figure out how to best meet the child's needs. No matter what kind of financial background a child comes from, everyone deserves a fair opportunity at education, even if that means the teacher alters the way they interact with the student. That is all we have for today. Thanks for listening.